Hey, are you dead? No. I know it's been a tremendous amount of time since my last upload, and unfortunately I just haven't been able to get out to the range quite as often as I would have hoped, so I'm a little sparse for actual shooting footage at the moment, but I have been working on quite a few things, like this, or this. So I'm still around, still doing plenty of things, don't worry. That's not what this video is about, so let's cut the bull and get into it. So the SAS-12, a cheap Chinesium, $140 semi-automatic shotgun. We fixed it up pretty well, but there's one bottleneck in the entire operation, and that is the magazines. So the problem is, these magazines don't seat as well as they should. This is fully seated, but it has enough play that it pops down about 1/8 of an inch or so, and that can be enough to disrupt the feeding. Fully seated, cycles just fine, but pull that down a bit more, and it jams up. You can see rounds in there and whatnot. So that's a problem. How do we fix that problem? Well, we have two options. Either one, we go into each and every individual magazine and add a little bit of material on to every one of those, but I don't really like that idea because then you'd have to modify every single magazine that you want to use. Or option number two is we come into the magazine release itself and add a little bit more material onto the top of that so that every single magazine unaltered seats a little bit higher. Hopefully that should solve the problem. All right, so here we have our gun. Here is the pin that holds the magazine release in place. We're gonna go ahead and pop that out. And one of the easiest ways to pop out pins is to just take a roll of tape. Any tape at all, doesn't really matter, as long as it has that hole in the center. And just lay it right on top, and you can just drive it out. That gives you a little bit of space underneath. So, take our punch, and a nice soft rubber mallet, and drive this out. Now you actually want to be careful with these pins because they are incredibly soft, and if you beat on them a little too much, they will absolutely peen, and if they peen, that means they're going to be flared out on one of the ends, and it's going to be impossible, if not very difficult, to drive them out or in or any which way at all. So take a look at yours, see what it looks like. Mine here is flared on the right side and not on the left. So we're going to drive it out towards the flared end. Line it up and just give it a little tap, and there you go. Now, this whole arrangement is under spring pressure. You have a spring right in there, so you want to be careful taking it out. Just keep hold of it, take that out, and slowly release. And there's your components. You have your magazine catch itself and the spring. And that's all you need from that. So we're gonna take this guy and we're gonna weld just a smidge, maybe 1/8 of material up at the top there. And if you notice, it's actually a little roughly cut already. It's got just a little bit of a dip on that side, not very finely, precisely machined. So we're gonna add a bit more material around there. Hey, shouldn't you be wearing gloves? Yes. All right, it's a little rough around the edges, but let's see if that's the right dimensions. Now, as expected, we've put a little bit too much weld on there, but that's perfect, which means that we can slowly grind it down until it fits just perfectly. All right, so I think we've got it just about where we want it. We've been gradually grinding it down until it just barely fits. So I can't tell you what the dimensions are exactly. It's going to be, hand fit to your gun in particular. So you're just going to have to wing it. But let's go ahead and slap this back in there and see how it looks. Now I'm not going to put the spring in just yet. We're just going to put it in gently without any pressure. Size it up, see how it looks. So we got our magazine here. Now, you'll know it fits when the lever obviously comes back towards you. It's not moving just yet. We're going to ease it in. It looks like it is just barely making contact there. Just to be clear, this is your magazine here. It's seated all the way, fully, no slop whatsoever. pulling down on it, and you'll notice, compared to how it was before, not moving whatsoever. There's no back and forth movement, there's no up and down, no side to side, no nothing. It's nice and snug. So let's try another magazine just to be sure. And it's not quite seating, so we might have to grind just a smidge more on that one. Yeah. All right, so it seems like the tolerances between these smaller mags and the 5-round mags are a little bit different. This 5-round mag just barely fits. These ones just can't quite get them to. So we're gonna pop this back out one more time. Take just slightest sliver off of this one more time. So here's my conundrum. I've been gradually shaving off material from the magazine release here. The 5-rounders will fit very, very snugly. These ones, they will not. So if you look real close here, you can see these ones, the smaller ones, that magazine lip is ever so slightly lower. And obviously, I like the 5-round mags a little bit better, so I get to pick one here to hold spec to, and that's going to be these. So these ones, I'm going to take just a hair off that lip there, and hopefully they'll work just fine. But in the meantime, these 5-rounders are super duper snug. Perfect. Now, you should probably use a hand file for this, but I am very, very lazy. Ooh boy, that just got it. Man, that is super tight. That is not going anywhere. Okay, we'll keep that one right where it is. Now with these, you notice that on that lip there, it's not flat, right? It's got a little bit of an angle to it. That's for that lever to be able to rock in place. If you're gonna do this, don't just take it straight in. Make sure you get it at a bit of an angle. So for the finer stages, let's use a hand file here. And it just barely fits. It's a little stiff getting it out. That might just be because this is a little rough still. We need to clean it up just a little bit on the edges and whatnot. Still, it's just a smidge rough from the welds still. But size, dimensions seem just about right. Let's go ahead and clean this up properly, get it polished, a little bit of cold blue slapped on there, and throw it back in and see how everything looks. Now, remember, when you're cold bluing, it's important to use just a little bit of heat. Whew, too much heat. As a joke, of course. You want it to be warm, you want it to be essentially hot enough to where you can touch it, but not hold on to it. Did I mention I'm lazy? Because, man, I am super lazy. Now you should come back in here, take some steel wool, clean it up, heat it up again, put another coat on, so on and so forth. I'll probably just do one or two because, as mentioned, lazy. And there you go. I could get it a little deeper than that, but honestly, this looks fine. All right, so getting this thing back together, the magazine release, is actually super tricky, a lot trickier than it should be. If they would have just made one of the legs on this spring a little bit longer, it would have been no problem, but they didn't, so here we are. So how to get that back in there? Take your magazine release, take your spring, you want it lined up just like that. Honestly, it doesn't really matter which leg goes which direction, they're about the same length, but I like to have it this way with the sort of rolled leg towards the bottom. Now it always helps when you're putting components with springs in them back inside something or another to use a technique called a slave pin. Essentially, you just want a little pin made out of anything, it doesn't really matter, wood. This is just some brass I had laying around. Maybe you chop the end off of a drill bit, or hell, even use a Q-tip. I've done that plenty of times before. It doesn't really matter so long as it fits in there and holds that spring captive, because you do not have enough hands, you do not have enough fingers to get this all in place without something holding it together, believe me. Now, as mentioned, this can be pretty tricky. You can fight with the spring all you want, but honestly, I'll show you what worked the best for me. So we're gonna put our pin through, just essentially find where that blind pin was lined up and just press it out. And we no longer need our slave pin. So everything's in place, right? Well, no. This spring essentially needs to be compressed and on the other side of this ledge here. So how do we do that? Well, I tried a bunch of different things, like only putting this pin in halfway to try and give this a bit more area to work with, but nothing really worked as well as what I'm about to show you. So you see, the nice thing about springs is, well, they're springs. They like to compress and deform and just kind of bend. So that's exactly what we're going to do. We're going to take some needle nose pliers, grab a hold of that, and basically we're just going to yank it all the way over this way and then down, and then just kind of beat it in place. Now, this will potentially scratch up the inside of the receiver here, but between you and me, I don't care. All right, so just again, pull it all the way over to the other side, get it started, and you'll see it's, there we go, just kind of resting on that lip right there. And we'll just kind of force it down. Now, it's still not in place. To be in place, you can see it needs to be back all the way over that way. So we're just going to take a punch here and just kind of nudge it over. Make sure it's fully seated and we have positive pressure there. And that is 100% complete. All right, let's try it out. Here we go, 5-rounder. Clicks into place. And it still has a bit of slop, just a little bit of slop. But again, that was necessary to get these stupid things in there. Let's try one of these. And that locks up. And that is super, super tight. Let's try another one. Is that in? Yeah, that's in. That one is still super tight. I'm going to shave just a hair off of there. Better. All right, so we only have one thing left to do, and that is test it with some actual shells here. All right, moment of truth. It is seated. And again, you'll notice this does not, it has a little bit of play up here at the front, but other than that, it's no real in and out. We'll see what it does here. So, here it goes. Oh hey, isn't that a little dangerous, loading live shells into a shotgun? Not really, and honestly, even if it was, I'm kind of in a concrete bunker right now. So the only thing that's really in any danger here is my hearing, which is, well, not the best to begin with. So let's find out if this cycles properly. There's one. I'm gonna yank on this as hard as I can. Backwards, forwards, all over the place. And look at that, cycles perfectly fine. So second magazine here, this is another one of the originals. Locks in place. This one has a bit more slop. Let's try yanking on that. Still goes. Push forward. Still goes. Yank down as hard as we can. Oop, that was my fault. Didn't yank it down all the way. Tried feeding it anyway. So now here's the one that I'm worried about. This is one of the 5-rounders. And as you saw before, they are going to have a little bit more slop because their tolerances are a little bit off from the original magazines. So we have it locked in place there. It does have a little bit of play, a little bit, but let's see what happens here. Fully seated, no problem. Pulling down. I don't think that was a problem with the magazine, because if it's a problem with the magazine, it just locks all the way back. Yeah, just got stuck a little bit. Okay, pull forward, push forward rather. Still cycles. Pull back and down all the way. Still works. And would you look at that? Now the only thing left to do is then actually fire it. But from what I just saw, I think that's a solution to our problem. I don't see it having the same issues that we were having before with the bolt getting stuck back on the magazines because they were just so far tilted out of place. These, with our modified magazine catch, they're gonna hold up just fine. And maybe I'll do some shooting with this later on down the line. But you know, there you have it. After so much work, after so many man hours, we finally have a quote unquote reliable, solid shotgun for 140 bucks. Plus like 300 in labor.